All right, Cordyceps. Fascinating mushroom, just fascinating herb all round. Long history of use with the Chinese, at least 3,000 years of use and anecdotal evidence around its benefits. They use it for everything from kidney health, lung health, stamina and endurance, virility, so testosterone increase, and really just giving people more endurance, that's what we're really seeing in human studies as well. If you're coming to this herb, you're probably coming to it for the endurance benefits. It definitely does seem to have some evidence for raising testosterone as well, and I think particularly in aging men. And I think this is a great herb for women too. Don't get me wrong, the way it's raising testosterone would just help women with their natural hormone production as well. So it's multifaceted. But I think its standout feature is endurance, and improving athletic performance, things like your run, and of course recovery, which we now know it can also do in humans. We've got a great study that's come out in 2024 that shows increased satellite cell proliferation and much faster skeletal muscle recovery time, and really good evidence around it. So it's a really cool infographic I'm going to show you as well, or I guess it's actually a photograph of the muscle biopsy that they took, showing you how it's actually improving the repair. So super fascinating. And for anyone that's training a lot, whether it is endurance type training where VO2 max is important because it's shown to improve that, or it's just someone that's training with weights and wants to recover better and just have more stamina throughout the day to get things done and just have more of that, you can just march on, then I still think it's a really valuable herb. Also seems to have some anti-aging benefits, seems to increase ATP production, which we know is so beneficial for anti-aging and for exercise performance, but not so much for strength increases. You're still going to be looking for something like creatine for that, but it would pair really nicely. But also we're seeing NAD increases with this herb too, and collagen synthesis improvements. We've actually got a human study with a cream with a cordyceps extract in it that has shown improvements in skin quality as well. So we're just seeing multiple benefits, a lot more human studies starting to come out as well, which is exciting, and a lot of evidence in the rodent studies for all of this too, endurance improvements, testosterone improvements, and so on. So we'll dive into a little bit of it. I guess the other thing that's really cool about cordyceps is we've got anti-cancer, antimicrobial, and antiviral properties in a lot of these studies, particularly in the rodent models. That's exciting. There's a nice added benefit, if you're coming to the herb for the endurance increases and you're able to rest assured that it's also potentially helping you in these other ways, then it's great. We're not seeing any evidence of a negative safety profile whatsoever. It's got a really good safety profile. It's been tested for that. In the one study that's unfavorable for testosterone in humans, there's only been one study to see if there was a testosterone increase in humans. And sadly, it's a pretty lousy study. I mean, we've got 16 participants there, 19 to 24 years of age. Very unlikely to see a testosterone increase in that age group from something like a natural herb that's just upregulating test production through the normal channels. Maybe with Tongarali, but something like cordyceps, I wouldn't have expected to see much of a testosterone increase, and as such, it doesn't show that. But what it does show is improvements in their liver values. So they're recovering better through the liver. So very safe herb. But it's showing potent benefits in VO2 max, time to exhaustion, and a range of other benefits in humans. So I mean, the anti-fatigue activity is thought to be an improvement in the concentration of ATP and antioxidant enzymes, and also a decline in the intensity of lactate and reactive oxygen species, which are free radicals. Also seems to be promoting an activation of the AMPK and AKT/mTOR paths, and we're seeing that in rodent studies, and it's likely to be doing that in the humans as well, which would explain the improvements in VO2 max and time to exhaustion. But we're unable to pull that apart in humans as much as we are in the rodents, quite literally and figuratively. But we're seeing, greater athletic endurance and a longer time to fatigue and a higher VO2 max in humans, and also a lower blood lactate percentage. There's a really good study that shows that. And we're looking at, anything from, I'd say at best, a 12% increase in VO2 max in one of the studies. That was sort of the top end of it. But even in the lower end studies, the increase is significant. And the thing that anyone that knows a bit about VO2 max would already know is that getting improvements in something like that is very incremental. It's very hard to do. And these studies are only going for 28 days, 3 weeks to 28 days. Was a 3-week study that saw the best increase, which was that 12% increase I referenced, roughly a 12% increase in VO2 max. And that is really hard to get in a time frame that short. It's almost not possible unless you're going through sort of newbie improvements. But if someone's been cycling for a while, a lot of these human trials, or human studies I should say, with the cordyceps are really aimed at cyclists who are really looking for endurance boosts, but runners would benefit too. It's just not in the running community enough, if you ask me. But for them to get those sort of increases, that's really hard to do. Once you're at the upper end of your VO2 max, pushing into new territory where you're seeing improvements takes time, and it's very incremental, so it's quite significant. But also the time to exhaustion, we're seeing things like an extra 100 seconds after 28 days of supplementation in another study before exhaustion by the end of it. And it seems to really shine at about the 3-week mark and beyond. So, first 7 days in some studies, we're not seeing much of a change yet. And we're using doses of around 1 to 2 grams. Now, I think the recovery time study is probably one of the most exciting, which really opens up the door to using cordyceps for more than just the endurance boost, but also for the recovery. And this could benefit bodybuilders as well that are just going through like hypertrophy phases, and they want to see an acceleration in the stem cell recruitment in the skeletal muscle for faster recovery and repair. Brilliant. Recovery starts to become the bottleneck, especially as we age in the gym and we're trying to get there 4 days a week, or at least 3 days a week for consistent all body days, upper and lower body days, to hit the same muscle group at least twice a week for growth and at least once a week for maintenance. Recovery becomes the bottleneck. It becomes the sticking point. If you're still sore, if you're still fatigued, if you're having trouble getting back there, sure, you can look at things like your protein content, make sure that's 2 grams per kilo of body weight. You can look at things like glutamine, making sure you're getting adequate sleep, and all of that will help. And a lot of the testosterone boosting herbs and supplements that I've talked about definitely going to assist with that. But something like cordyceps could be a game changer for getting you back in the gym. And that's because we've got a study in 24, so just this year, that has finally shown that cordyceps is assisting in reducing the time it takes to repair from exercise-induced muscle damage. And this effect's been associated with earlier stem cell recruitment into the damaged sites for muscle regeneration. So we're getting stem cells in there faster, we're getting the repair kicked off in a speedier fashion, and we're seeing full resolution in 24 hours of the damaged muscle cells. And there's actually an image I'll put up now showing this. You can see the cordyceps baseline, the placebo baseline. You can see after the exercise that they put both groups through, which I believe was like an assault bike or something to that effect. You can see at the 3-hour mark where placebo's at and where the cordyceps group is at. You can see that muscle is beat up in the placebo. And in cordyceps, you can see some damage there. You can see the stem cells in there, the nuclei, ready to get activated. And then at the 24-hour mark, it almost looks exactly like it did back at baseline. Whereas you can see in the placebo group, it's still got a little bit of work to do before that muscle's fully rejuvenated. So that's massive. That could have implications for hypertrophy as well. This was more of an endurance-based muscle stressor that they put them through, but I would see this as something that could significantly improve your leg day DOMs as well. And I personally have been noticing that lately. I've been using about 1 to 2 grams of the Superfeast cordyceps every morning, in with my Shilajit, last bit of my coffee there. And some days I'm going for a run and noticing the benefits on the endurance for the actual run itself at the time, but also my legs just aren't as beat up as they used to be. And I thought a lot of that was the adaptation to running a bit more often, which I think is, you can't discount that. But with a study like this, we can see that people in the same time frames are experiencing faster turnaround on their recovery. So it could be a huge element to my improvement lately, and my fatigue has certainly reduced. I can go for longer throughout the day, get more tasks done, work, and then still feel like training at least a little bit, a little weight session in the evenings as well, which traditionally wasn't the case for me so much. Well, certainly not to the frequency that I'm at now. I'm able to get there at least 3 times a week, which is my goal. 4 times is optimal, but at least 3 times to hit legs twice a week and upper body at least once a week. So profound. We're seeing some really profound effects, and that was Cordyceps sinensis. So the CS4 variety would be suitable to replicate that benefit if you want to do it at home. And I'd recommend 1 to 2 grams. They were using, I believe, just 1 gram before exercise to elicit this benefit. Whereas in the VO2 max studies, we're looking at 2 grams, and then in another one, 4 grams was the dose that they were working with. So you can play around with that. I personally recommend the Cordyceps from Superfeast. It's not a militaris. Some of the VO2 max studies were using militaris, so you can try that too. That's readily available as well. But I do like the sinensis for the skeletal muscle repair, and I do trust Mason to choose the best available products. And he's selected the CS4 variety as just for the consistency, and I guess the quality that he's able to achieve with that, and purchasing it at scale. I think it just is a safer Cordyceps to be selecting. So, if he's going with it, that's what I'm going to go with. I really trust Mason and his brand for any of my mushroom products, just because the guy has integrity all the way through, and he's built that into the company as well. So, shout out to Superfeast. We do sell it at our store. I'm not shouting it out because I make huge margins on it or anything to that effect. I just trust the quality of it, honestly, and I want you guys to get the best. So that's the one I'm recommending. But if you want to try Militaris, I think that's another cool one to experiment with. We used to stock the Lost Empire Militaris. We don't anymore. So that might be a brand you can look into if you want to source your own. Another great brand for these types of herbs would be Dragon Herbs, so you can always track that brand down too. They probably have a decent Cordyceps, but I mean, for me, Superfeast all the way. So there's some of the things that we're sort of looking at. I mean, just to rattle off the benefits once more, so all the different things that you could be looking at Cordyceps to benefit you with. Number 1, increases in testosterone. We need more human studies. We don't have a good human study for that. I think it would be more effective in men over 30. It seems to improve the LH signaling and then the ATP CAMP conversion in the Leydig cells to then have the cascade to turn cholesterol into pregnenolone, then into progesterone, and then into testosterone. So it really comes in right after the signaling of the LH, and some studies are suggesting it might actually increase the LH signaling itself, but it's also turning ATP into CAMP faster, somehow upregulating that process in the testes itself. So that's what it's doing in the rodent studies, and they've done in vitro and in vivo studies in those animals to show this happening, and we just haven't had a good study on humans for it. But I chance a guess it's raising your testosterone. I do feel a boost from Cordyceps. I do feel, there's more in my test stack than just Cordyceps, and there probably always will be, but I have had it on its own before and felt the testosterone increase, mostly around the energy associated with a boost in test, though not so much of an aphrodisiac, I suppose I'd say, as some other test boosters can be, like Tribulus, Shilajit over time, diaspartic acid, but a really good pairing with those, I would say, and of course the fenugreek. And don't forget Tongad if you need some serious kick. But like I always say, I wouldn't run Tongad every day. So that's how we're seeing it activate more testosterone. And also for females, we're going to get the VO2 max increases, the ATP increases, and that's really coming from the improvement in the concentration of ATP and antioxidant enzymes, and of course the decline in lactate and ROS, and of course the activation of AMPK. So that's really where the energy boosts and the endurance boosts are probably coming from, not so much from that upregulation of testosterone, which is a possibility in humans. We just haven't seen it in a study yet. You're looking at increased testosterone potentially in humans, increased VO2 max. It's been shown in several human studies now. Increased recovery. We've got a study for that that's really showing that to be a huge benefit of cordyceps that was up until this point not as well known, maybe by the Chinese, but not so much by the supplement community. Increases in ATP, so that means it's going to pair well with your creatine, maybe with your peak ATP as well, which is another supplement, and therefore synergizing to improve your workouts and potentially increase your muscle mass as well, although we haven't seen that in cordyceps studies in isolation. It's safe at large doses in studies. We've seen up to 12-gram doses, and I suppose cordycepin is seen to be one of the key bioactive components, but there's a lot of components in cordyceps, and there could of course be an entourage effect. So you really do want whole herb, in my opinion. And again, I'm seeing the CS4 as a great option. The other things that it can help with: anti-cancer, antimicrobial, antiviral, and anti-aging. We're seeing skin improvements and collagen upregulation. So host of benefits. That's just to cover a few. Like I've said at the beginning of this video, you're probably coming to this herb for the endurance benefits, maybe interested in the testosterone boosting benefits, but hopefully you're staying with the herb for the longevity benefits as well. I recommend it. It's in my morning stack. I take it with my Shilajit and my coffee in the morning before my run, and a dose of creatine as well. I get out there, little dash of carnitine, do a lap of the park, mostly for fat loss and of course the cardiovascular benefits. So I'm looking at like a 3K run, and I'm going to slowly up that to a 5K run. And that's all I'll probably ever do. But since introducing the cordyceps, I found that so much easier, so much more effective, and my recovery is just significantly improved. So some things to think about. They're the key benefits, I think, that are really worth taking it for. Don't sleep on the recovery benefit. Have a look at that study if you want to check it out too. I saw Dr. William Wallace, who's a great resource for this stuff as well. Add him on Instagram if you haven't already. Post about it. I've now read the study myself. I'll put a link obviously in the YouTube video for you to check it out too. It's huge. Those benefits alone would be more than enough reason to include cordyceps in your stack. But also if you do any kind of cardio, even if you don't and just want more energy throughout the day and less fatigue as you get older, put it in there. I think you'll really be glad you did. Well, that's it from me. If you've got any questions about cordyceps, I'm going to put a fair bit of information in the description here. Hopefully I kept it simple enough so you could digest it a little bit and reference just a few studies to give you some context. But just remember, it's been around in the Chinese apothecary for over 3,000 years at least. It's been well regarded by them. It's readily available now in good quality extracts like the CS4. Great evidence coming out for multiple benefits for anyone that trains or is looking to age gracefully into their elder years, and maintain their body to be, vigorous and strong and able to keep up with daily life, with your kids, with whatever it is that you need to do each day. The exercise regime from a recovery standpoint and from an endurance standpoint to actually, complete the exercise. So maybe don't see it so much as something that's going to increase your strength or give you much bigger muscles. That's something where you'd be looking at creatine, maybe HMB. I want to look into that. I've been seeing a few studies on that piqued my interest. I always thought leucine would be all you need, but maybe there's some benefits to HMB. And of course, other forms of creatine, like the HCl. Yes, that's probably what you're looking at if you want to increase muscle size and strength. But when it comes to increasing your endurance and your recovery, think of cordyceps.